Well, here we are, friends. It's the last Sunday of Advent, and Christmas is just around the corner. What a joy. I love Christmas. Christmas is closing in fast, though. So together, just as a reminder, over the last few weeks, we have explored hope and peace and joy. Three of the Advent themes that are actually divine promises, and we spent some time exploring how they are actually divine promises. Promises that, when lived into, will actually change the world. So if we live into hope, choose to live in peaceful ways, and remember to let our joy out as often as we can, even if the world seems a bit dark, just to know that we will move mountains and hearts will be changed. And that is the power of love, and that is the power of Christmas, and that is all good stuff. So which brings us to today, and today's divine promise is love, the power of love. You see, our whole Christian faith, not just Advent, but all of our faith, all boils down to love. Love from a Savior, love to a neighbor in need, love shared between friends and strangers, between loved ones and enemies. Love of creation, of which we are all a part. So today, as we continue to prepare for Jesus' birth or rebirth in our lives, we do so not through serious theological reflection or strict dogmatic adherence to church teachings, but through unconditional love, through subversive laughter, through a sense of wonder, and most especially through our singing. Because Love Sunday is the day that we join our voices with Mary's and Elizabeth and God's and the rest of creation as we sing of the love, the capital L love, that speaks to our very souls. So today, all of worship is a love song. And we gather to sing that love song today. Or maybe better yet, we sing the love song that Christmas is. The one that will change absolutely everything. Now, you might be sitting there wondering about the singing part. You know, some of you might even be saying to yourself, really? Really? Singing will change the world? Really, Jenny? I'm not sure about that. And then some others of you might be saying, well, Jenny must be getting a little bit tired, right? Because her logic's getting a bit fuzzy, or maybe, you know, she's a dear soul, but she doesn't quite understand how the world works. I'm the first to admit that might very well be true. But I do stand by my statement. To love is to sing. Or maybe a better way of putting that is that when we sing, we can remember to love. Have you ever noticed how many times people in the Bible sing? It's more like a movie musical than a play, right? So you remember watching the Hollywood musicals where the drama would be going on lovely, and then all of a sudden they break into song? And you go, what's that about, right? Well, our Bible is the same. Throughout the ages, our ancestors in the faith would break into song, probably because what they were thinking or feeling could not be expressed in any other way. Singing taps into our hearts and our souls like nothing else can. And this is especially true in the Gospel according to Luke. In the first few chapters especially, the author of Luke employs a lot of songs as he begins to tell the people of his day and the people in our day the story of Jesus. The story of Jesus is introduced through song. Mary sings when she is greeted by her cousin Elizabeth, and that was the passage we heard today. The song part is called the Magnificat. It magnifies God in the world somehow, those words and that music. So that was a song. In Luke's Gospel, we hear Zachariah sing when his son John is born, and then his tongue is finally loosened, and he bursts forth in song. And then, of course, on Christmas Eve, we're going to hear how the angels sing of peace and goodwill when they share their good news of great joy with shepherds. And Simeon sings his song of farewell once he has seen God's promises to Israel kept in the birth of the Christ child. Now, we might wonder why all these songs. And I think the truth then and the truth now, as so well articulated by David Lowes, he's a pastor and theologian from the States, he thinks that singing is actually an act of resistance. And if you want to talk about resistance, the Gospel of Luke is a great place to start. So singing as an act of resistance, that's not all that singing is, of course. Sometimes it's an act of joy, and I hope you all danced and sang in your kitchens last week. So sometimes singing is an act of joy. Sometimes it's something that you do when you're hanging out with your friends and you're remembering the good old days and you sing, so it can be an act of camaraderie. But singing is also an act of resistance, and it's a powerful act at that. The slaves in the U.S. in the 1800s knew this. So when they sang their spirituals, they were both praising God as well as protesting their masters who may have locked them out of the church, but could not keep them from the promises of deliverance that were contained in the Bible. And the leaders of the civil rights movement knew this too, and they sang songs like "We Shall Overcome," even while so many in their society didn't give them a chance to advance their cause, let alone triumph or overcome anything. And in our more recent history, the protesters who gathered by the Berlin Wall in 1989 knew this as well. It's interesting, I find it interesting to note that for several months prior to the Berlin Wall falling, the citizens of Leipzig gathered on Monday evenings by candlelight around St. Nikolai's Church, the church where Bach composed so many of his cantatas. And they gathered there by candlelight to sing. So, over 2 months, their numbers grew from about 1,000 people to more than 300,000 people, which was over half of the citizens of that city. All of them gathered together, and by candlelight they sang songs of hope, they sang songs of protest, and they sang songs of justice. They sang loud and often until the songs that they sang shook the powers of their nation and actually changed our world. It's relatively recent history, but not all of us remember. We lived in a very different world prior to 1989, and the singing and the Berlin Wall coming down changed our world. Later, when someone asked one of the officers of the Stasi, which were the East German secret police, why didn't you crush this protest, the singing protest, like you had so many others? And to that officer replied to that comment by saying, we simply didn't have a contingency or a plan for song. It's kind of subversive, eh? I believe that Mary and Elizabeth knew the power of song as well. I think they also knew just how hopeless and ridiculous their personal situation was. 2 women, one too old to bear a child and one so young that she was not yet married. Yet both of them called to bear children of promise through whom God would change the world. And they probably knew how little account the world would pay to them. Women that from that time, from that place in the world, women who came from a place called Galilee where that was beyond the wrong side of the tracks. They were tucked away in the poor and socially suspect region of the country, a place so far removed from the courts of power and influence, and yet they were to be powerful and influential women. Both Mary and Elizabeth knew what it was to live under the oppressive regime of Rome. But even in spite of all that, even when faced with the long odds of their situation, they didn't retreat, they didn't apologize, they didn't despair, they sang. They sang of their confidence in God's promise to upend the life-denying powers that exist in the world, to reverse the fortunes of an unjust world so that everyone, all people, could be on a level playing field, right? To lift up those who had been oppressed while bringing the lofty oppressors back to earth. Right? So, they sang, and then we are reminded that when your back is to the wall and everything looks grim and dark, one of the most unexpected and powerful things that we can ever do is sing. So caught between the false opposites of despair and optimism, Mary and Elizabeth also remind us of another way, the way of hope. That powerful place where despair and broken hearts walk hand in hand with optimism. So when caught in circumstances that are dark or difficult, when we're caught in those circumstances and we know with every fiber of our being that we cannot fix it on our own, that we need to look beyond ourselves for rescue and relief, we have a choice. We can join in the singing of our own protest songs so that we might hear God's promises to us again and hear those promises in a new way. And in our singing be reminded that no matter the struggle, no matter the darkness, God is going to hold on to us and see us through to a better day. We can do that, or we can hide away and pretend it doesn't hurt and pretend that we're not frightened. So you see, singing is truly an act of resistance. When we sing our carols at Christmas, singing of joy to the world and of the love born away in a manger, or of the peace that comes in the silent nights, what we are really doing is an act of profound love and faith and resistance. It's love because we're resisting the voices that we hear every day that say our problems are impossible, so why bother trying to fix them? We're resisting the popular notion that there's no divine mystery in this world. There's no love in this world. So when we get up and sing about love, we are saying, no, there is love in this world. We are resisting, like Mary resisted, the notion that we have no role to play in the turning of the world. We are resisting the notion that we are powerless in this world. We are resisting the notion that there is nothing that we can do to heal our relationships. But I also would go one step further than David goes. I would say every time we gather on a Sunday and rise and sing our songs of faith, even just by gathering, we are engaging in a subversive act of resistance against the powers that be in our world. Gathering for worship is an ultimate act of resistance. Because gathering for worship and singing these protest songs where we remind each other of love is not a practice of the status quo, because the status quo, or the powers that oppress, they don't spend a lot of time thinking about how the world might be made more just. I know, shocking, isn't it? Status quo doesn't spend a lot of time thinking about what it is for a system to be equitable, or God forbid, loving. So when we gather on days like today to hear God's promises, we become people who say no to that way of being, no to the cynicism and the fashionable trend of not worrying about anything, not worrying about the web of relationships, the web of love that this universe and this world is. We who gather on a Sunday to sing are not content to let the poor be downtrodden. We're not content to let violence have its way. Not content to let people feel that they have no worth. Not content to let people feel that they have nothing to offer. We're not content to let family fights go unresolved. Not content to live in a world where the beauty of diversity seen in the faces of our immigrants or the members of the LGBTQ community or the faces of our Aboriginal peoples of our nation and all other humans, where that beauty is denied. We are saying we don't want to live in that world. When we gather for worship and when we sing our songs, we gather together under the banner of a different way. We gather and sing our love songs as a way of resisting all that is negative and unloving in this world. And by our singing, we empower one another through the singing of our faith, so that we might be strengthened in the ways of love, and in that strength begin to change our lives and our world. That's the power of Christmas. So this season, Starting today, let's sing our hearts out. Let's not worry overly much if we sing of mangers or a guy in a red suit. Let's just sing. Let's not worry about how well we carry a tune. Let's just sing. There are those among us who sing like angels, and we thank God for them. But there are others of us who sing like me, poorly. The reason I back up from the microphone when the hymns come is not to be gracious, it's that my biggest fear is that my singing will be caught on the microphone. So there are those of us that sing like me, poorly. But we dare to sing anyway. We sing the few notes that we know, and we sing them often, even if they don't fit the hymn, but we sing those notes and we sing them loudly and proudly. And we thank God for people like me and you, the ones who can't sing. We thank God for them as well. So this season, let's sing our faith at the top of our lungs, so that the whole world might see that the wisdom and the power that can come from love, so that we too might be reminded that love is the only thing that matters. It's the only thing that has ever mattered, since it's the only thing that's going to save us all. May it be so in your life and in mine. Amen.